Good morning, Chair Volendroff, sorry. Members home, staff and guests. The lobbies are open. The recording has begun.
Thank you, Gretchen. Good morning, everyone. I will now convene the board caucus meeting for Tuesday, January 28th, 2025. Board member Garrett is away today, so we will have board member Holmes and myself. And with that, we will jump right into our agenda this morning with a legislative update from Mark Webster. Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair Volendroff and Member Holmes. In between the many meetings with legislators, Will and I are trying to help members understand our priorities and a lot of the work that we're currently doing in rule, stuff that they might not get the chance to see. Today, we're going to get a hearing on our agency request bill on excise tax exemption data sharing. There's a hearing on this year's cannabis home grow bill as well. And then a hearing on House Bill 1347 on cannabis testing labs too. I think I want to drill down on that one just briefly. Frankly, I'm a little unclear on what prompted it. Apparently, some labs are worried about a duplicative process once they're accredited for a test, and that accreditation is now housed at the Department of Agriculture. Then we certify the lab. We are currently in rulemaking on the certification process, and thank you, Denise, for sending me some of the draft rule last night. So I wonder if they're looking at the old rule and worrying that they're going to have to go through another long process after accreditation. But it's also important to help the legislature understand that certification is still important. We're going to look to ag on the science, but we still have oversight to ensure that everything's above board. It's not about can you do the test. It's making sure that nobody's been paid to fudge the test. So both are important. So we're going to have to see what happens on this one, and we'll have more information after today.
Mark, what time did you say that hearing was?
That hearing is at 1:30 in House Consumer Protection and Business.
Thank you.
I mentioned it in the legislative team yesterday, but there's just a lot of energy around tweaking Washington's liquor laws. Yesterday in a hearing, they were described as archaic. I think somebody described them as bizarre. And it's something that we're hearing a lot from members passing along the concerns of their licensee constituents. So tomorrow, I think there's going to be a hearing on bills like House Bill 1602, which allows contract kitchens in wineries and breweries. And House Bill 1515, the City of Seattle led initiative to allow cities to expand outdoor service. So that one will also be heard tomorrow. And then, of course, we have the bills in both chambers, excuse me, to do a top to bottom study of the state's liquor tax system as well. Friday is going to be a big day on the tobacco front, or tobacco and vapor front, as the House CPB committee will hear the flavor ban bill from Representative Reeves and the Vapor Product Registry bill from Representative Santos. And then just wanted to flag that next week, we are going to be part of a panel of state agencies presenting on IT projects and modernizing aging systems, something I think we now have a bit of experience to speak from. That'll be to the House Technology, Economic Development, and Veterans Committee. We're going to be speaking on a panel, I think, with the Department of Licensing and a few others. WATEC will be there as well. As mentioned last week, I think we're still navigating what and how we weigh in on bills with the new governor's office folks. They provided some additional written guidance late last week, but frankly, I think we just need to see how this plays out in practice. And with that, I will take any questions you might have.
I have a quick question regarding the liquor laws, and just if you've got any insight about what might be driving that interest at this particular time. And then if you've got any examples of, like you said, the term bizarre was used. Yeah. I mean, can you just elaborate a little bit on both of those things?
Sure. So that comment came in a hearing for a Senate bill on test kits for spiked drinks. And so it's a member who is not normally writing bills in this area. They're not on the policy committee. And I think, and I had this reaction too, if you come to this policy space from somewhere else, the rules are going to look very different. And I think Justin has got the good spiel on that about how everything is still prohibited unless there's a specific license or a specific allowance for it. So that kind of flipping things on its head looks different. And it means that the license types are extremely specific as well. So
we have a lot of them, right?
You have a lot of them. And so if you're coming to this new and you're saying, we want to have these test kits available in bars, and you open up statute and you're like, what's a bar? Is it a tavern? Is it a spirits, beer, and wine restaurant? And so they just kind of applied it to all of them. And I think we're seeing that too. The contract kitchen is another example of business models that don't fit neatly into those license types, and some of the friction that folks are having with that. But it's always interesting to see where that's coming from. But that was the experience yesterday.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Member Holmes, any questions?
No, other than I would just like an idea of when any of the scheduled hearings, when we're actually sending someone there. I would love to just be able to,
Perfect.
you know, is it all, Mark, for instance, are we usually just submitting written testimony, or do we actually testify live?
We'll be testifying live on our agency request bill today, but not on the other ones that I mentioned,
Okay.
unless we're called up.
Yeah, it'd be great, like a link to, I probably have it somewhere in an email, but I would just highlight a link to the testimony where we can view it. It'd be great.
It's a great idea.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mark. Appreciate all your work during session and look forward to continued work this session.
Thank you.
All right, moving right along, we're going to go to policy and rules teams update. And so I will turn it over to Daniel Jacobs to kick us off here.
Good morning, Chair Vollendroff and Member Holmes. We have 3 petitions that we're going to be presenting tomorrow that Denise and Jeff are going to preview here in just a moment, and a supplemental CR 102 that I'll be previewing on cannabis samples. But before I do that, just 2 quick updates. Excuse me. Statute requires that every 6 months that state agencies file what's called a rule development agenda, which is something that that announces what our plans are for the next 6 months of rulemaking. They're due January 31st and July 31st. And we just submitted ours yesterday, got that filed. It's on the LCB's website. So I just wanted to sort of announce that's up and available for folks who are interested. And then the only other thing is that next week on Monday and Thursday, we're having stakeholder engagement actually on the rulemaking on lab accreditation that Mark was just talking about on implementing last year's legislation 2151. Denise is going to be leading those sessions. Invitations, those are going to be virtual only. Invitations to those were sent out via GovDelivery, and you can go to our rules webpage to find that information. Those are going to be Monday morning from 9 to 11 and Thursday afternoon from 1 to 3.
Great. Hey, Daniel, can you do Member Holmes and I a favor and send us a link to the report that you just submitted just to make it a little easier for us to find? I'm sure we could find it, but it would be super helpful, and maybe include Member Garrett as well.
Certainly, I'll send that to Gretchen to have her pass along to you all.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. And then with that, I can pass it off to Denise to preview her petitions for tomorrow.
All right. Thanks so much. Morning, Denise.
Good morning, everyone. I can just start right in. Good morning, Chair Vollendroff and Board Member Holmes. This morning, I'm going to preview a petition response I'll be presenting for action during tomorrow's board meeting. On December 4th, Mr. Forrest Shevsvik from Good Buzz Brewing Company in Chehalis submitted a petition for rulemaking to allow wineries, breweries, and distilleries to sample, serve, and sell bottles of their products at public and community events. He points out in his petition that there is currently no approved way for wineries, breweries, and distilleries to sample, serve, and sell their products at public events like these, and that this would be a way for small businesses like his to promote their products. Because the LCB has not created licenses or permits without statutory direction, per what Mark was just talking about, the Director's Office will be recommending denying this petition for rulemaking. The types of liquor licenses, permits, and endorsements issued by LCB are described in statute. RCWs describe what manufacturers are allowed to do, including where they are allowed to sell and serve, including on their own licensed locations, additional tasting rooms, farmers markets, and special permits for events not open to the public. No existing licenses or permits allow the type of sampling, serving, and selling of products at public events of the type requested by the petitioner. I'll provide more information about current liquor licenses and permits and some recent legislative bills that did not pass related to serving and selling alcohol at public events during tomorrow's board meeting. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Denise, can you just talk, Member Holmes, this is a way of just kind of helping you understand this process. If we accept a petition, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to act on that petition. Can you just talk a little bit about that so that Member Holmes understands that process?
Sure. Actually, I might defer to Daniel on this because he's great at explaining this type of background.
Sure. So I think a good example that I could give is with cloud storage. So a couple years ago, we got a petition on rulemaking from the Washington Canada Business Association to explore, specifically stating in language that cannabis licensees are allowed to store their records in cloud storage. There's a rule that says you have to keep your records for a certain number of years. Here are the records you're allowed to keep. You have to keep them, and then it says you have to keep them on the premises. And it became a discussion of, well, what does on the premises mean? Do you need to like physically have them in drawers and files, or could you keep them on a server and keep them on the premises? So they submitted a petition for rulemaking. The board accepted that petition, and what that means is that we need to do rulemaking. Now, what doing rulemaking means is to go through the rulemaking process. That doesn't mean we actually need to end up changing rules, but we need to explore that. And so in this instance with cloud storage, we filed the CR 101, which was to say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. We talked internally, and after talking to staff was unclear if we really needed to change the rule or if we could just issue a statement saying, hey, just so you all know, yeah, if you have your server on your premises, you can keep your records there. But if LCB shows up and you're like, oh, my server's down, that's going to be treated the same thing as if you can't get into your file cabinet. And there's an expectation that you're able to produce records. And so we don't want our enforcement officers going there and sitting there while you're on hold with Xfinity or IT or whatever it is, waiting for your server to get back up. It's like, listen, you can keep it on your server, but then you run the risk that what happens with servers is going to affect your ability to access records. And we did a survey, and we ended up, after getting feedback, coming to the conclusion that we don't actually need to change the rule. We could just release a statement that says basically what I just told you, which is, hey, there's nothing in rule stopping you from using a server, but you gotta be there, and you need to be able to produce it if our officers come knocking. And so that's an example where we accepted a petition for rulemaking. We did the rulemaking process, but we didn't actually end up changing a rule because after deliberation and consultation with stakeholders, we determined it wasn't necessary.
Great, thank you so much. And Pete, I'm just using this as an opportunity since we don't have opportunity to have this kind of dialogue to just kind of onboard you with some of the processes here. So please bear with me if you already know some of this stuff, but just trying to bring you up to speed. And Denise, one of the reasons I asked that is because as I hear that you're recommending that we deny this petition, I'm going to be looking for that tomorrow. Like, what's the harm in taking this on if in fact we know that we don't have to do something. So that's in my mind as I'm thinking about what I'll be hearing tomorrow.
You read my mind. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that.
All right.
So I'm going to move on to the second petition. And good morning again, Chair Vollendroff and Board Member Holmes. I'm going to preview a second petition response I will be presenting for action during tomorrow's board meeting that is closely related to the one I just discussed. On December 10th, Ms. Lena Campiana, owner of Cup of Swords Tavern in Olympia, submitted a petition for rulemaking to create an event license for wineries, breweries, distilleries, and alcohol retailers to serve and sell bottles of their products at public events. This is similar to the previous petition from Forrest Chevsnick, except it adds retailers. She points out in her petition that this would help small businesses promote their products and generate income in a way that supports the community and promotes commerce in a safe and welcoming setting. Again, because the LCB has not created licenses or permits without statutory direction, the director's office will be recommending denying this petition for rulemaking. The types of liquor licenses, permits, and endorsements issued by LCB are described in statute. As described in the related petition from Mr. Forrest Chesnick, RCWs describe what manufacturers are allowed to do and also what retail licensees are allowed to do. And retail licensees include restaurants, taverns, and grocery stores. No existing license or permits allow this type of sampling and serving and selling of products at public events as requested by the petitioner. I'll provide more information about current liquor licenses and permits and recent legislation that was introduced that didn't pass related to retail licensees at serving alcohol at public events during tomorrow's board meeting. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick question, Denise. And so I maybe missed this the first time and I picked it up the second time. So essentially, it sounds like what we're saying is this is a legislative change versus an LCB change, and that we would recommend that the petitioners engage the legislature around this versus the LCB?
I don't know that we're recommending that, but I think what we're saying is it's not something that we do without statutory guidance or action. So
Okay, so rephrasing that, it's a legislative process versus an LCB process.
yes, and
Okay.
I can clarify that also for tomorrow.
Okay. Daniel,
Yeah.
anything to add, or just you were going to clarify?
No, the only thing I'll say is that we've had conversations with the petitioner, Mr. Chesvick, and I indicated to him as much, and I indicated to him
Okay.
that odds were that this wasn't going to be something that was within our authority to do, and so I also anticipate you saying you could be let the petitioner know about this. What I could say is he's already aware. My understanding is he's already in communication with his local legislator to
Thank you.
seek a fix.
Appreciate that. And Denise, thanks so much. I appreciate it. And that helped me. Again, I missed that in the first presentation, and just helps prepare me for tomorrow. So thank you.
Am I correct that the petition does kind of echo House Bill 1515, at least some of the authorities, some of the analysis there?
I mean, maybe Mark could speak to that. I think 1515 is much larger, but yes, I think it's more of a public setting with, but that seems like a much larger.
Right. We don't need to get into that for this meeting. I just wondered if the advice you give us will, reference any parallels.
Mark, anything to add? I see it came on.
No, I just agree with Denise. I think 1515 is about a slightly different thing, but based on the conversations that Daniel's just talked about, I would be surprised if we didn't see a bill on this topic. It has not dropped yet, but I foresee it coming.
All right, thank you so much. All right, Member Holmes, anything else?
No, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just want to, Gretchen and I maybe can work on this when I'm in the office tomorrow, but I've got this message keeps popping up, says your mic has been disabled. You can no longer unmute. So
That's
just
weird.
In case you're wondering why I'm flailing around, my computer's telling me to flail around, but okay.
All right.
Thank you.
If all of a sudden I see you flailing and we actually can't hear you, I'll give you some indication.
Thank you.
All right, great. All right, so I think next up we have Jeff, if I'm not mistaken. So Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Can you see me?
I can't see you, but we can hear you.
My window popped up, but I'm not there. Hold on, let me try this again. It's very strange. I may have to speak without being on camera. You still can't see me.
I think that's fine.
Okay,
Unless there's no rule that I'm missing, Gretchen or anybody else that has to be on camera, right?
No.
Okay, go ahead,
sorry,
Jeff.
I could be on my phone, but anyway.
Yeah, no worries. Just go ahead.
I'll go ahead. Okay. Good morning, Chair Volendroff and Board Member Holmes. At tomorrow's meeting, I will present the Director's Office response and recommendation to the board regarding a rulemaking petition from Ash Shojan, a member of the public, regarding funding for trauma-informed counseling and research into the legacy of the war on drugs. The petition requests creation of a new rule in Chapter 31455 WAC that would allocate revenue from the state cannabis account to provide counseling and research on the effects of past cannabis criminalization and the legacy of the war on drugs. Because spending from the cannabis account into which cannabis tax revenues and license fees are deposited is strictly controlled by the legislature in RCWs 6950-530 and 6950-540, their director's office will recommend denial of this petition. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have no questions, and not that I disagree with the petitioner's thoughts here, but it doesn't sound like it's within our authority, so appreciate that. Member Holmes, any questions or comments?
I assume it's a little more important since there will be no federal funding for something of that subject in the foreseeable future. But
yeah. All right, thank you.
Okay,
All right, thank you, appreciate it. All right, Daniel, back to you.
All right, thank you, and good morning again. I'm going to preview the supplemental CR 102 on cannabis samples that I'll be requesting approval of during tomorrow's board meeting. If approved tomorrow, there will be a public comment period open until March 12th, when we plan to hold a public hearing on the proposed rules. Assuming that the public hearing doesn't identify any reason to substantially alter the rules, the final rules will be requested for approval during the March 26th board meeting, and they'll be effective April 26th. I'll just explain for a second what a supplemental CR 102 is. So the rulemaking process begins with a CR 101, which is called a pre-proposal notice, and that says we're thinking about doing rulemaking on this topic. After that is the CR 102, which is the proposed rules, which is saying, here are the ideas of what we think these rules should look like. After a CR 102 is filed, there's a required public comment period that says the public has a minimum of, I think it has to be a minimum of 30 days, but it's typically a little bit longer for the public to give written comment. And then there's a public hearing that we hold during our board meetings that is if you didn't get the chance to testify or submit written comment, or you want to also come in and testify in public, here's that public hearing. After the public hearing, if we decide that the feedback we've gotten and at the public hearing, the draft rules are good, we move forward with the CR 103, which is the final rules, and then those rules become effective. However, if after the public hearing and after the public comment period, we get the sense that we need to make some changes, and they're more than minor changes. It's more than just like fixing a citation or tweaking a word slightly. We need to sort of change the content. We do what's called a supplemental CR 102. And after the supplemental CR 102, then we have another public comment period leading up to a public hearing. And then so that process starts over. And so here with this rulemaking, that's what this supplemental CR 102 is. We had a CR 102, public comment period, and a public hearing. And after that, we talked to stakeholders and we got the sense that we needed to tweak some of these proposed rules. This rulemaking came from a petition from the Washington Cannabis Business Association, and the board accepted that petition in August 2022 to amend WAC 314-55096 regarding cannabis samples for cannabis licensees and their employees. The CR 101 was filed in March 2023, and we held stakeholder engagements in March and October 2023 and sent out surveys in July 2023. The initial CR 102 was filed in August 2024, making a variety of rule changes, and a public hearing was held in October. The initial CR 102 made a variety of changes, including combining two existing categories of vendor and educational samples into one unified category that we're now calling trade samples, requiring separate storage of samples from products to be sold at retail, identifying quarterly limits on how many samples can be provided per employee, clarifying that samples can only be provided to retailers who actually want them, and modifying requirements for sample jars, among other changes. Following the public hearing in October, LCB staff conducted several conversations with licensees and stakeholders about changes that they wanted to see. We also received several emails that are included in the materials describing changes they wanted. The CR 102 materials for presentation tomorrow and attached included tables showing the initial sets of changes that were made in the August 2024 102, as well as the proposed changes that we're making now, just so that everyone can identify sort of the progress of changes. I'm going to go into more detail tomorrow about those changes, but they include increasing the quarterly limits per employee, clarifying that sample jars can be displayed by retailers near the actual product being sold, clarifying some difference between the types of samples, removing references that had been introduced to measuring samples per harvest and per batch, and specifically identifying a winding down period, which is basically us saying that we know that we're changing a lot of the rules. And so licensees are going to have until September 1 to get rid of all of their old samples, whether that's by distributing them to licensees as appropriate, or using up their old labels. And then by September 1, if they still have old samples, they're going to have to dispose of those. But we did want, because we're changing the sample requirements, we want to give licensees time to get rid of their old jars and old labels, etc. I know that was a lot, so I'm happy to pause, take a water break, and answer any questions. But I'll go in, somehow I'm going to go into even more detail tomorrow.
I have no questions, so thank you. Member Holmes, any questions? Okay,
No questions.
Seeing none, I think we're good.
Thank you.
All right, you're done. Thank you. All right, that concludes our formal agenda. Member Holmes, I just wanted to check in with you, see how things are going so far, and are you feeling like you're getting well oriented, and how things are going in your first couple weeks here?
I think the inevitable hiccups on the learning curve to be expected, but the support of all the staff at LCB has just been phenomenal, and I feel very welcomed. And it's just a matter of, kind of going over some of the little glitches, like your microphone muting.
Exactly. Well, good. Well, you came at a particularly busy time, of course, during legislative session, and of course, it's a budget session, so lots of activity. So again, welcome, and looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Amen. Thank you.
All right. So our final item on the agenda is any board member or executive assistant updates. So Member Holmes, anything that you need to add?
No, that was my update. I think
All right.
we're doing very well, and I look forward to seeing you in town tomorrow.
Yes, I'll see you there. Okay, Gretchen, anything to add?
Nothing for me, Chair Volendroff. Thank you.
All right. With that, I will close this meeting of the board caucus. So thank you very much. Bye, everybody.